Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you're new. My name is Declan and thank you so much for joining me for today's video. In today's video I'm going to be talking about a young, free-spirited, happy boy that just vanished. But this story only goes as far as 2 blocks from his house. This is Weird World and this is The Boy in the Chimney. Joshua Maddux was an 18-year-old, nature-loving, free spirit. He was 6 feet tall and weighed 150 pounds. You may be wondering why I'm telling you what he weighed and his height, but this is really important to the story, so keep that in mind. Joshua was from a small town in Colorado called Woodland Park. It's known for its national parks and never-ending trails. He loved the outdoors and spent most of his time there. He had such a carefree attitude and just went with the flow of life. He grew his hair long and spent most of his time writing music and practicing his songs on his guitar. His mum and dad were no longer together, but he lived with his dad Mike and his 2 sisters Kate and Ruth. One day Joshua decided to go for a walk, and just on the off chance he just mentioned it to his sister Kate. It was, bye, like, see you later, I'm heading out now. And that was nothing really strange for Joshua. As I said, he loved nature, so him going out a walk was not like alarming news or anything. Joshua ended up never returning from his walk, so Mike, his father, called every single one of his friends just to see where he is. Maybe he'd stopped in at a friend's house, spent some time there, and then just, I don't know, was coming home extra late. It was a little bit not like him, but, just checking. None of his friends had even heard from him that night, so Joshua's father reported him as a missing person. Because this was a small town, everybody knew about it, like, very, very fast. Posters were made, his face was everywhere, everybody was on the lookout for him. Mike was just trying to figure out why a young, happy boy would just vanish. If anybody knew him, it would be his dad. With Joshua being 18, Mike did have to come to terms with it. Maybe he just got up and left and didn't want to come back, but that was something that Mike just didn't buy. I mean, this was his son. He would know if something was going on in his life that he didn't want to live this version of his life anymore. So Mike knew that there was nothing mentally wrong with Joshua. There was nothing that would, trigger him to just want to harm himself in any way or just disappear off the face of the earth. But there was one thing that was playing on Mike's mind, and he thought this could maybe be the reason. Just a few years back, Joshua's older brother Zachary had actually committed suicide. Joshua was so close to Zachary, and this really badly affected him. Joshua looked up to Zachary like a god. He was his idol and meant absolutely everything to him, so it really, really crushed him when he decided to take his own life. But years had passed and everybody in Joshua's family had seen that he had actually managed to deal with it. I mean, obviously it still hurt him somewhere, but he had managed to deal with it and finally accept it and realised that his brother was obviously in pain. It wasn't something that he could understand, but he was going to live his life and be happy. So no one close to Joshua was even worried once they thought about it that was the reason. 7 years later, when the search had finally came to an end, Joshua was found, but it wasn't in the way that the family had hoped for. Joshua's remains were found in an abandoned cabin just 2 blocks from his house. He was found with both knees pressed against his chest and his head resting onto them. This is known as the fetal position. The only way they could tell this was Joshua was via dental records. There was no signs of guns, knives, or any type of violence. Question is, how did he get in this position? What happened? The cabin owner, Chuck Murphy, decided that the cabin needed to be taken down and houses were going to be built on this land. His brother had been living there for quite a few years, but for the past 5 years it just remained empty. It was smelly, the animals had taken over, everything was just falling to pieces, so the best option for them was just to tear it down and build something even better. While they were demolishing this cabin, they found Joshua's remains wedged up inside the chimney. The man in charge of this investigation, Al Bourne, who was the county coroner, ruled this as an accidental death. In a quote, he said, "The hard tissue showed no signs of trauma. There was no broken bones, no knife marks. There were also no bullet holes. There is so far no answers to a number of things. It's very confusing." He finished off this statement by saying that due to Joshua being so adventurous, that Joshua decided that it would be a fun idea to explore this cabin, so he was going to climb up the outside of the chimney and go down through the chimney to get inside, and somehow got stuck. The weather at this time of year would have been -6, so it would have been absolutely for a reason, and they said that Joshua would have died from either two things, one being dehydration or the other being hyperthermia. However, there's holes in this story because the owner of the cabin, Chuck, he said that this would be impossible to climb this chimney because there was a metal mesh covering all the way around it. This was to stop debris and animals getting inside the chimney and clogging it up. But when the police decided to investigate what Chuck was saying, there was no proof of this mesh ever being there. By the time they had demolished everything, Chuck had made a specific pile for just metals to go and be recycled, so he's assuming that the mesh was taken off, put in that pile and disappeared before any of this could even be searched. Chuck was really fighting this idea that this was an accidental death because there was just too many things that didn't make sense. One being the way that Joshua was found. He was found naked from the waist down. All he had on was a thermal top that he would wear underneath his clothes. All of his clothes had been taken off. Everything from his shoes, his trousers, his underwear was stripped from Joshua. But where were they? Well, they were found. They were inside the cabin, laid out right in front of the fireplace. But this would have meant that Joshua had already gained access into the cabin. So why would he be in the chimney? Now, as I said, it's -6, so you're probably thinking that maybe he just took off his clothes because they were freezing cold. Maybe they were wet, covered in snow, who knows? And laid them out to dry. But this would also make no sense because he would have had to have put the fire on, so that would mean that he couldn't be up the chimney. So the idea of him taking off his clothes because he was too cold, that's ruled out. That couldn't have happened. Before the body of Joshua was found, the internet went crazy. When news broke of this, I mean, you know what the internet's like, everybody just ran with theories about who they thought it was and what they thought happened, and here was one of them that got more attention than any other on the internet. One user had posted on Reddit, and they had posted a question. For anybody that doesn't know what Reddit is, it's basically, I think you just ask questions. I'm not too sure, I've never used it, but I think you just ask whatever questions you like and random people comment the answer. So someone had posted a question saying, how do you get over finding out that someone you once knew is a murderer? Okay, very random question, but okay, people responded. This person was very detailed in the fact that they did not know this person but knew of them. So it was kind of like, you know, you've seen someone or you know of them, but you don't like personally know them. So they were really specific in making that like a clear point. They then went into more detail saying that they had a friend called Joshua, and this friend Joshua had made another friend called Andy. Andy, however, was a bit odd. He never really made many friends at school. He was kind of like a dorky, hippie, kind of strange kid that nobody really spoke to. He was just overall a bit of a loner and just done his own thing. But when Joshua and Andy met, they realised that they had so much in common. They both loved music, they both loved guitar, so they really bonded over this. The user then ended it by saying that the second that Joshua met Andy, Joshua disappeared. It was discovered that Joshua and Andy had become so close. They were going to plan a trip together. They were going to go all the way from Colorado, which was where they were from, to New Mexico. However, just before the trip was about to take place, Joshua went missing. But Andy still went. But there's a whole other story to this that completely blew my mind when I was researching this. This is just like, whoa. I'm all for giving people a chance. You know how like when they said, he's a dorky, hippie, strange kid. I'm like, well, that's no reason that he's like a murderer or some sort of suspect in all of this. But with this next story, I was like, oh, while Andy was down in New Mexico on this trip that he had planned to go with Joshua but went himself, he had made friends with a caretaker. This caretaker was the caretaker of a disabled guy, and they all decided to go over to the disabled guy's house. And this one night, the caretaker decided, listen, I'm going to go for a shower. You two chill, I'll come back out. By the time he come back out, the disabled guy was stabbed to death and Andy was gone. As you can imagine, news spread fastly again, and this got all the way back to these people that were posting on Reddit. The group on this post all decided to team together and they were going to go to the police with this information. But Joshua's body hadn't been found at this point, so this meant that there was no solid evidence that Andy had done anything to Joshua. With that being said, people said that they remember hearing Andy walking around bragging that he had put Joshua in a hole. This wasn't crazy enough, taking the blame for, well, I guess now I have to say one murder rather than a missing persons case. Andy was also going about saying that he had put a woman in a barrel in Taos. Now this just made everybody else say, oh my god, you are a weirdo. Like everybody thought it now, like Even I think it. Like, that is just really weird and messed up in the head to say that. If you're joking about this, it just isn't funny. But it gets worse. There was a body found in Taos in a barrel, and it was the body of a woman, exactly like what Andy was saying. However, they already had somebody in custody for that. Someone was already getting the blame, and the police decided that that guy was already guilty. Andy was let off. This story is just so confusing because there's just so many things that don't add up and don't make sense. There was a breakfast bar that was in this cabin, and attached to this breakfast bar was this pole. It was pulled off and placed against the fireplace. This would have meant that this would have blocked all of Joshua's access to this cabin, because say he had climbed up and climbed all the way down. Oh, you know, can't get in because it's blocked. Well, how did his clothes get in there? Another thing being, the fireplace had an insert in it. One of those ones that hold all the wood to burn. That was like fixed in place. You couldn't move it, and even if you could, those things are really, really heavy. So this would have also blocked Joshua's entrance into the cabin. Again, couldn't get his clothes off and then climb all the way back up. So let's try another route. Let's just say that he had access to this cabin and he just straight up walked through the door. That would make perfect sense if it wasn't for the fact that he was in the chimney, naked. His clothes would be there. So does that mean that he then left the cabin naked, climbed up this chimney, which the mesh was there, so let's say it wasn't, let's just miss all of these little points, then he climbed down the chimney, knowing fine well, after being inside, that there was things that would block him from getting back in. Going all the way back to Chuck, however, he knew that this didn't make sense. There was no way that they could just rule this an accidental death with all of these, I want to say clues, I'm putting that in quotations because, again, I don't know what actually happened, but it was too many things that ruled out accidental death, and I'm sure you guys must agree with me. If you don't, I would love to know what you think in the comments below, but Chuck really fought really hard to make sure that nobody believed that this was the case. He was working so hard to try and debunk this, but people started to attack him. People were working so hard to just blow off what Chuck was saying because he was old and because he didn't know what he was talking about. He messed up on a few things, and those things were he kept changing his mind on what the Cajun was called. This was such a stupid thing to sit and nitpick at, but Chuck had said that one of them was rebar and one of them was wiring, and basically they do the same thing, but they look a little bit different. One of them is built into the stonework, and the other is built around the stonework, kind of like a cage. The cage one, however, is placed on top of the chimney, and it's kind of like, it looks like a little birdhouse. It's to stop any animals from getting in, birds, debris, anything from just blowing down the chimney and causing any problems. But if someone was to climb up to the chimney, you could easily just like knock it off. Like, it wouldn't be like, you know, so sturdy where you couldn't break in. Chuck was also saying that the pole inside the cabin could have been placed there by him and his brother because they did visit over the past 5 years. They just didn't stay for very long. They were just in checking it out, really. But then this still leaves Andy a suspect, right? Wrong, because how could he possibly have done all of this with the exact same obstacles still in his way? Let's say he walked inside the cabin and decided to murder Joshua. One, how could he possibly shove his body up into that chimney? Because the fireplace insert was still there. So maybe he climbed the chimney. Well, that's hard enough by yourself, but with 150 pounds of a dead body, kinda seems impossible, and all of that mesh is still attached to the fireplace. This meant that Andy was completely ruled out because they had no proof. There was nothing to say that he had done it or that he'd even been there. The police concluded this investigation by saying that this was just an accidental death, and that it was caused by Joshua just wanting to explore. He was just interested in seeing this cabin and decided to go inside through the chimney. I don't really buy it, but it is what it is. I don't know, but the whole situation with Andy seemed a little bit fishy. Just the fact that he was kind of a loner kid, never had many friends, and then said really weird stuff like putting someone in a hole, which I guess from the top of a chimney, it is a hole. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what you think happened to Joshua. Was it foul play or was it an accident? If you guys did enjoy this video, then please remember to give it a huge thumbs up. It would mean so much to me. And if you haven't yet already, then remember to subscribe. Hit that little bell beside the subscribe button and you will never miss another notification from me. This was Weird World, and this was the case of the boy in the chimney. I really hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye.